Her fingers trembled against the cold wood of the door, hesitating at the last second before pushing it open. From the other side, voices whispered her name like a condemnation, and she knew there was no turning back. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird as her breath caught in her throat. There she stood, an orphan despised, about to face the man who could destroy her or save her with a single word. The golden light escaping through the cracks of the door seemed to burn her skin, reminding her that some places weren't made for people like her. But it was too late to retreat. Before we dive into this tale, leave a comment below with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us which city you're joining us from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. The dust clung to her skin, like a constant reminder that she didn't belong in that place. Marina scrubbed the stone floor with mechanical movements she had perfected over 15 years of servitude, trying to ignore the laughter coming from the main hall. The court ladies entertained themselves with some cruel gossip, and she prayed not to be the topic this time. The coarse fabric of her dress scratched her skin, sewn with cheap thread that easily unravelled, revealing patch upon patch that told the story of her condition. Every piece of clothing she wore screamed her position in the cruel hierarchy of Stonehaven Castle. Someone whose existence depended on others' charity, another mouth to feed, useful only as long as she could work. Stonehaven Castle was an imposing fortress built on black rocks, its towers rising like accusing fingers against the sky. Marina knew every corridor, every staircase, every corner where dust accumulated and where she would be forced to clean. She had grown up within these cold walls, observing the lives of the nobles from afar, like a spectator of a world she would never belong to. The years had taught her the art of invisibility, how to move without making a sound, how to lower her eyes at the right moment, how to become part of the furniture when the attention of the powerful turned in her direction. The other maids treated her with a mix of pity and disdain. She had no family to visit her, no stories of a past before the castle, no hope for a better future. She was just Marina, the orphan found as a baby at the gates, raised out of obligation and kept out of necessity. Some whispered there was something strange about her, the way animals calmed in her presence, how plants seemed more vibrant in the gardens she tended, how sometimes her eyes gleamed with a light that shouldn't be there. Her knees ached against the cold marble, but stopping meant giving someone a reason to yell. An orphan since 5, raised by the dubious charity of the royal house, she learned early that invisibility was survival. The less attention she drew, the fewer beatings she received. There were scars on her arms that told stories of days when she hadn't been invisible enough, when her inconvenient presence had been noticed by those who shouldn't. The years in the castle had shaped Marina in ways she was only beginning to understand. Each humiliation had taught her to hide her emotions behind a mask of submission. Each moment of loneliness had forced her to find strength within herself. She had developed an almost supernatural ability to predict the moods of the nobles, to anticipate when it was best to disappear, to sense the tension in the air before political storms erupted. It was a skill born of pure necessity. A mistake could mean days without food, nights in the dungeon, or worse. Winter was the worst time in the castle. The cold penetrated through the ancient stones, and the servants' quarters, located in the basement, became almost uninhabitable. Marina shared a small room with 3 other maids, sleeping on a straw mattress that retained more dampness than warmth. It was in these moments, huddled under thin blankets, that more resembled rags, that she allowed herself to dream of a different life. Not grand fantasies of wealth or power, but simply the possibility of a place where she was accepted, where she mattered to someone, where she could be more than just useful hands to clean up others' messes. Stonehaven Castle was an imposing fortress built on black rocks that rose like fingers of the earth towards the stormy skies, its towers reaching heights that defied the clouds themselves. Marina knew every corridor of that stone labyrinth, every staircase worn by time, every corner where dust accumulated like a silent reminder of the years passing. She had grown up within these cold and impersonal walls, observing the lives of the nobles from afar as a permanent spectator of a world to which she would never belong, no matter how long she served within it. The years had taught her the cruel art of invisibility, how to move without making a sound that could disturb sensitive ears, how to lower her eyes at the exact moment to avoid unnecessary confrontations, how to become part of the furniture when the attention of the powerful turned in her direction. It was a complex dance of survival that she had perfected through painful experiences, each error resulting in punishments that served as brutal lessons about her place in the castle's cruel hierarchy. The other maids treated her with an odd mixture of pity and disdain, as if she were a constant reminder of how low one could fall on the social ladder. She had no family to visit her on her days off, no comforting stories of a past before the castle, no realistic hope of a better future waiting for her beyond those walls. She was just Marina, the orphan found as a baby at the castle gates on a cold winter morning, raised out of religious obligation and kept out of practical necessity as long as she could work. Some of the older maids whispered when they thought she wasn't listening, talking about strange things they noticed in her presence. The inexplicable way animals calmed when she was near, how plants seemed more vibrant and healthy in the gardens she cared for, how sometimes when she was especially focused or emotional, her eyes seemed to gleam with a light that shouldn't be there. These observations made her feel even more isolated, even more different, even more aware that there was something about her that didn't fit into the world around her. The castle had its own unwritten rules, its own language of glances and gestures that determined who could speak with whom, when, and where. Marina had learned this language through trial and error, each mistake resulting in public humiliations or private punishments that taught her about limits that could not be crossed. She knew exactly where she could walk and at what times, which corridors were forbidden for people like her, which conversations she should pretend not to hear, even when they happened right in front of her. A scream echoed through the corridor, followed by hurried footsteps that resonated against the stones like drums announcing war. Marina raised her head just enough to see two maids running towards the main hall, their faces tense with worry that revealed something extraordinary was happening. Something was shifting in the normally controlled atmosphere of the castle, a nervous energy spreading through the corridors like invisible fire. The unusual commotion made her stomach clench. Changes in the castle routine were rarely good news for those who lived in the shadows. "Marina, head cook." Catherine's harsh voice cut through the air like a whip. "Stop dragging your feet and come help in the kitchen. We have an important visitor arriving." She stood up slowly, wiping her hands on the worn apron that had belonged to other maids before her. Important visitors always meant more work, more shouting, and more chances to do something wrong. The apron was stained with years of service, its frayed edges telling stories of countless days of toil. She followed the narrow corridors that connected the servants' quarters to the rest of the castle, feeling the cold of the stones penetrate the worn soles of her boots. The corridors changed as they approached the noble areas. The stones became smoother, decorated with tapestries that cost more than Marina would ever see in her entire life. The contrast was deliberate, a visual reminder of the distance separating servants from lords. She knew every tapestry, every vase, every ornament, for she had cleaned them all countless times. But she could never own them, only preserve them for more worthy eyes. In the kitchen, chaos reigned supreme, as if a storm had struck the normally organized space. Pots boiled with steam escaping in dense clouds, knives chopped vegetables at a frantic pace that made the utensils dance like instruments in a desperate orchestra, and the smell of roasted meat mixed with expensive spices from distant lands. Head cook Catherine gestured orders in all directions, her face red with stress and sweat dripping down her forehead, as she supervised an operation much more complex than any normal celebration. The kitchen was the nervous heart of the castle, the place where all news arrived first and where secrets were whispered amidst the clatter of pots. Marina knew every corner of that environment, from the stone oven where bread was baked to the cold pantry where cheeses aged. She had spent countless hours there, peeling potatoes, cleaning fish, carrying heavy buckets of water that left her back aching for days. Head cook Catherine commanded the kitchen with an iron fist and a sharp tongue, but occasionally showed small gestures of kindness. An extra piece of bread, a less harsh word, a moment of rest when no one was looking. But today was different. There was a tension in the air that transcended the normal stress of a large meal. The maids moved with nervous haste, looking over their shoulders as if expecting something terrible to happen at any moment. Fragments of conversations reached Marina's ears, words about strange signs, about disturbances in the kingdom, about the Alpha King who had left his own lands to travel there. No one knew exactly what was happening, but everyone felt that changes were approaching like a storm on the horizon. Drops of sweat ran down her forehead as she supervised an operation too complex for a kitchen accustomed to simple routines. "The Alpha King is coming here," whispered one of the older cooks, passing Marina with a steaming platter that exuded aromas of rare herbs. "They say he sensed something that woke after years of silence." Marina pretended not to hear, but a shiver ran down her spine like icy fingers tracing invisible lines on her skin. Stories about the Alpha King circulated through the corridors like dark legends that took on a life of their own in the servants' imaginations. They said he could sniff out lies like a wolf hunting prey, that his golden eyes saw through people's souls as if they were made of glass, that his presence made even the most arrogant nobles tremble with fear and bow in absolute submission. The legends about King Dominic of Moonshadow were so many and so varied that it was impossible to separate truth from fiction. Some swore he didn't sleep, that he spent nights walking his territories like a vigilant phantom. Others whispered he could communicate with wild animals, that wolves and eagles obeyed him like loyal soldiers. There were stories about his superhuman strength, accounts of trees uprooted with his bare hands, of walls torn down with a single punch, of enemies lifted from the ground like children. But what most haunted people's imaginations was his ability to perceive emotions and intentions, as if he could read minds or smell fear, lies, betrayal. Marina had grown up hearing these stories, some told in fearful whispers, others in tones of respectful admiration. The Alpha King was described as a just but ruthless man, a protector of his subjects, but a destroyer of his enemies. They said he governed not only through laws and armies, but through a personal magnetism that made it impossible to disobey him. Women sighed when they spoke of him, men lowered their voices with respect, and children created games where they pretended to be the powerful king who commanded the north with absolute authority. Some maids swore he wasn't completely human, that there was something wild in his nature that made him more dangerous than any ordinary man. The accounts varied, but all agreed on some points. The Alpha King was ruthless with enemies, loyal with allies, and possessed a power that transcended the merely political. Some spoke of a superhuman ability to perceive emotions. Others mentioned impossible physical strength. All agreed that crossing his path was dangerous, especially for those with something to hide. "You girl," head cook Catherine pointed a plump finger in her direction, "go clean the Hall of Mirrors and be careful not to break anything or I'll have your hide." The Hall of Mirrors was the most imposing room in the castle, reserved only for special occasions that defined the destiny of entire kingdoms. Marina had never entered there alone, always accompanied by other maids or closely supervised by some suspicious noble. The hall was used to receive foreign dignitaries, for coronation ceremonies, for negotiations involving the life and death of thousands of people. It was a place where history was written, where decisions were made that would echo for generations. She gathered the rags and the bucket of water, double-checking that she had all the necessary materials. A mistake there could result in severe punishment. She walked through the corridors that became more luxurious with each step, as if she were ascending a social ladder through architecture. The walls displayed portraits of ancient kings, men and women with severe expressions who seemed to judge every person who passed under their painted gazes. Marina always felt diminished by these faces of the past, as if they knew she didn't belong in those sacred spaces. The corridors leading to the hall were decorated with tapestries that cost more than she would see in her entire life. Every thread had been woven by artists who dedicated years to a single piece. Every colour had been obtained with rare dyes from distant lands. Marina knew every detail of those decorations, for she had cleaned the dust that accumulated in their folds. She had ensured that the sunlight did not fade their vibrant hues. But she could never own them, only preserve them for more worthy eyes, for people who were born with the right to appreciate beauty without working to maintain it. When she pushed open the double doors of the hall, the air literally left her lungs, as if she had been struck by a physical blow. The hall was a symphony of gold and crystal that defied adequate description, with gigantic mirrors covering all the walls like portals to parallel dimensions. Each mirror was a work of art in itself, frames hand-carved by master artisans, surfaces polished with such perfection that they reflected not just images but light, colour, life. Chandeliers hung from the high ceiling like constellations of glass that captured and redistributed every ray of sun in thousands of glittering facets, and the marble floor reflected every detail like a frozen lake, preserving moments in time. The visual effect was stunning. Marina saw herself multiplied infinitely, creating an army of reflections that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was like being in the center of the universe and completely lost at the same time. Each movement created waves of light that spread across the mirrors like ripples on a lake. Each breath seemed to echo through parallel dimensions where other Marinas made the same movements, in perfect synchronicity. She started at the entrance, wiping the damp cloth with extreme care. The silence of the place was almost sacred, broken only by the soft echo of her movements. It was strange to be there, surrounded by so much luxury, knowing that her presence was tolerated only because someone needed to clean the dirt the nobles didn't see. Every movement was calculated not to disturb the perfection of the environment. The mirrors reflected her image infinitely, creating an army of ragged orphan girls, all working in synchronicity. For a moment, she wondered what it would be like to see her reflection dressed in silks and jewels, if her blonde hair would look different pinned with golden clasps instead of rough twine. But she pushed those thoughts away. Fantasies were luxuries she couldn't afford. That's when she noticed something different. In the center of the hall, on a pedestal of black marble, there was a stone she had never seen before. It wasn't large or particularly beautiful, just an irregular block of dark rock that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. The stone contrasted dramatically with the surrounding opulence, as if it were a piece of another world placed there by mistake. Marina approached slowly, mesmerized by the object's strangeness. The stone emanated an odd sensation, as if it were alive, waiting. There was something magnetic about its presence, a quality that made the air around it seem denser. She knew she shouldn't be there, that touching anything in the hall could mean lashings or worse, but something pulled her, a curiosity that grew like hunger in an empty stomach. The surrounding mirrors seemed to multiply her image to infinity, creating an army of ragged, orphaned girls, all hesitating before the same mysterious stone. For a moment, Marina saw herself through the eyes of those who scorned her. Small, insignificant, easily discarded. Her worn clothes, her dull hair, her posture bent by forced submission. but something inside her protested against this vision. Why was a simple stone there, in the centre of the most important hall in the castle? Why did her heart beat faster with every step she took towards it? Why did she feel as if the stone was specifically waiting for her? "I shouldn't be here," she murmured to herself, but couldn't stop walking. The stone seemed to call. To her, not with sound, but with something deeper. A resonance that vibrated in her bones, making her forget all the rules, all the fears, all the consequences. It was as if an invisible force guided her, as if her destiny were etched into the rough surface of that mysterious rock. She slowly stretched out her hand, her fingers trembling in the cold air of the hall. "If anyone sees me," she thought, but it was already too late to turn back. When her fingertips touched the rough surface of the stone, the world exploded in colours that had no name. Golden light burst from the cracks that instantly formed in the rock, spreading through the hall like liquid fire. The mirrors captured and multiplied the glow, creating a spectacle of dancing reflections that transformed the environment into something supernatural. Marina felt a strange energy course through her arm, climbing up her chest to explode in her heart like an ancient revelation. The stone was opening, layers peeling away like petals of a rock flower. And with each widening fissure, she felt something awakening within her, something that had always been there, dormant, awaiting the right moment to emerge. It was as if all the fragmented parts of her soul were finally coming together, creating something greater than she had ever imagined possible. The boom was heard throughout the castle. Screams echoed through the corridors, hurried footsteps headed for the hall. Marina knew she had no time to escape, that she would be discovered there, in the centre of the destruction she herself had caused. But strangely, she felt no fear. For the first time in her life, she felt complete. But when she looked at her own reflections in the mirrors, she saw something different. She was no longer the insignificant orphan girl. There was power in her eyes, an intensity she had never noticed before. The stone's light still danced around her hands, as if it recognized something in her that the rest of the world refused to see. The hall doors burst open violently and several figures rushed into the room. Nobles, guards, servants, all stopped abruptly at the sight. The cracked stone radiated a golden light that pulsed like a heart, and Marina stood in the centre of it all, still touching the surface that now seemed alive. "What have you done?" Head cook. Catherine's voice cut the silence like a whip. "You wretched girl! What have you done?" Marina tried to explain but found no words. How to explain that the stone had called to her, that something within her had recognized something within that rock, that for the first time in her life she felt as if she was exactly where she was meant to be. "Arrest her," ordered Lord Henry Blackwood, emerging from the crowd, his face contorted with rage. "This creature has destroyed a sacred relic." Guards advanced toward her, but something strange happened. As they approached the area where the stone's light still danced, their steps became hesitant, as if an invisible force pushed them back. The energy emanating from the spot was too intense, almost tangible, creating a barrier that protected Marina without her understanding how. "We can't get near, my lord," said one of the guards, retreating with a pale face. "It's as if something repels us." Marina looked at her own hands, still in contact with the stone. The light bursting from the cracks seemed to respond to her movements, pulsing stronger when she concentrated. It was impossible, but it was real. It was happening to her, the insignificant orphan who had never mattered to anyone. A heavy silence settled in the hall. Everyone watched the scene without understanding what was happening, without knowing how to react to the impossible. The orphan girl, scorned and mistreated, was at the centre of a phenomenon no one could explain. The power radiating from her was undeniable, transforming the hall's dynamic in a matter of seconds. It was then that news arrived that would change everything. A messenger burst into the hall, breathless and wide-eyed with terror. "My lord!" he cried, falling to his knees. "The Alpha! King, he felt it. The stone, he said something woke up, that someone touched the impossible. He's coming here, and he's furious. Marina's blood froze in her veins. The Alpha King had felt what had happened, even being miles away. And now he was coming to the castle, probably to find out who had dared to touch the sacred stone. The stories she heard about him returned with full force. His ability to sniff out lies, his fury when crossed, his relentless determination. She tried to let go of the stone, but found she couldn't. Her fingers seemed glued to the surface, as if the rock refused to release her. The light continued to pulse, and with each pulse, she felt her connection to the stone strengthen. It was as if they were becoming part of each other. "Get her out of there," Lord Henry Blackwood roared. "Do something!" But no one moved. All remained at the edge of the circle of light, watching with fascination and terror the transformation happening before their eyes. Marina was no longer the invisible maid. There was something majestic in her posture, a dignity she had never before shown, as if she were finally becoming who she was always meant to be. The stone gave one last pulse, more intense than all the others, and then the light began to dim gradually. Marina finally managed to release her hands, taking a step back. The rock now had a completely different appearance. The cracks formed intricate patterns that glowed with a soft, constant light, as if they had been carved by a divine artist. "Lock her in the dungeon," ordered Lord Henry Blackwood, his voice trembling with rage and fear. "And don't let anyone near her until the Alpha King arrives." This time, the guards managed to advance. They seized Marina by the arms with unnecessary force, dragging her out of the hall. She didn't resist, still in shock from what had happened. But as she was led through the corridors, a certainty grew in her chest. Her life had changed forever. The echo of her footsteps in the stone corridors mingled with the nervous whispers that spread through the castle. News of what had happened in the Hall of Mirrors would spread like wildfire, reaching everyone's ears before dawn. And somewhere, not too far away, the Alpha King rode towards them, carrying with him the promise of consequences no one could imagine. The dungeon smelled of dampness and despair accumulated over decades. Marina huddled in the corner of the cell, hugging her knees to her chest, trying to warm herself in the cold darkness that swallowed her. The rough stones scratched her back through the thin fabric of her dress, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the whirlwind of emotions consuming her. Hours had passed since they threw her in there, and she could still feel the tingling in her hands, as if the stone's energy still coursed through her veins. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that burst of golden light again, felt the power that had awakened at her touch. It was impossible that she had caused it, but the evidence was undeniable. The dungeon was a place forgotten by time, where daylight never reached, and the cold of the stones penetrated to the bone. Marina could occasionally hear the guards' footsteps above, the rustle of their clothes, murmured conversations about her situation. Words like witch, demon, and curse reached her ears, making her heart clench even tighter. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, approaching slowly. Marina raised her head, trying to see through the bars. A figure materialized in the gloom. It was Lucy, one of the older maids, carrying a tray with food. Her nervous eyes scanned the corridor before she leaned closer. "I brought your supper," Lucy whispered, pushing the tray under the grate. Her nervous eyes scanned the corridor before she leaned closer. "The whole castle is talking about you." "What are they saying?" Marina asked, her voice hoarse from crying. "Terrible things." Lucy shook her head, worried. "Some say you're a witch, that you made a pact with demons. Others swear you've profaned something sacred and that a curse will fall upon all of us. The maids are making the sign of the cross every time they pass the corridor where you were working." Marina felt her stomach churn. She had always known she was different, that she didn't fit into the world around her, but she had never imagined it could be interpreted as something devilish. The idea that people she had known since childhood now saw her as a monster was almost unbearable. "And what else?" she forced herself to ask. "Head cook Catherine wants you burned in the public square." Lucy's voice trembled. "She says it's the only way to cleanse the stain you've brought upon this place. But Lord Henry wants to wait for him to arrive. Him, the Alpha King." Lucy looked over her shoulder again, paranoia evident in every movement. "They say he felt what you did, even being a 3-day ride from here. That he stopped what he was doing and immediately left for the castle. Nothing like it has ever happened." A chill ran down Marina's spine. The idea of facing the Alpha King, the man about whom they told stories of terror and absolute power, made her blood run cold. She had heard of his ability to read thoughts, his superhuman strength, how his mere presence made even the bravest nobles bow in fear. "Lucy," she called softly as the maid prepared to leave, "why was a stone like that in the Hall of Mirrors? I'd never seen it before." The older woman hesitated, looking around with paranoia. "It arrived last night. Some hooded men brought it. Said it was the king's own order. No one knew what it was, but Lord Henry had it placed on the pedestal, said it was very important." "Very important for what?" "I don't know, child. But—" Lucy leaned in even closer, her voice becoming almost inaudible. "I heard the nobles whispering. They spoke of a test, of royal lineage, of things you shouldn't understand, and now you touched it and everything changed." Before Marina could ask more questions, heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Lucy paled, grabbed the empty tray and ran off, disappearing into the shadows like a haunted ghost. 2 guards appeared before the cell, their faces hard as stone. One of them unlocked the door with brusque movements while the other kept, his hand on the hilt of his sword. The tension in the air was palpable, as if they expected her to do something supernatural at any moment. "Stand up," the first ordered. "Lord Henry wants to speak with you." Marina obeyed with trembling legs. The guards escorted her through the castle corridors, and she noticed how everyone stopped to watch her pass. Looks of fear, hatred, curiosity, and something that could be respect mingled on the faces she encountered along the way. Some made the sign of the cross, others spat on the ground after she passed, and a few simply stared at her as if trying to decipher a mystery. Lord Henry Blackwood's study was in the highest tower of the castle, an imposing room decorated with expensive rugs and ancient weapons. The man stood behind his desk, his face red with irritation, sifting through documents with nervous movements. The room smelled of ink and parchment, odours that spoke of power and decisions that affected entire lives. "Sit," he said without looking up when she entered. Marina obeyed, choosing the chair farthest from the desk. The silence stretched for several minutes, broken only by the rustling of papers and the noble's heavy breathing. She could see maps spread on the desk, correspondence with wax seals, documents that seemed too important for her eyes. 20 years, he finally murmured, raising his head to face her. 20 years managing this territory without problems, maintaining order, following royal directives, and then you appear and destroy everything in a matter of seconds. "I didn't mean to destroy anything," Marina protested. "I don't even know what happened." "You don't know?" Henry let out a bitter laugh. "You touched the stone of recognition, creature. You activated an artifact that had been dormant for decades, sent a signal that was picked up by the Alpha King himself, and now he's coming here, and I can't explain how a ragged orphan managed to do something that even the most powerful nobles in the kingdom couldn't." Marina blinked, confused. "Stone of recognition? You really don't know, do you?" Henry studied her face carefully, searching for signs of lies. "The stone is an ancient artifact used to identify royal lineages. It only reacts to the touch of those who carry noble blood in their veins, and you, a beggar with no known family, made it shine like a beacon." The floor seemed to disappear beneath Marina's feet. Noble blood? It was impossible. She knew exactly what she was. a worthless orphan raised by the dubious charity of the court, stripped of any importance. She had grown up knowing she had no past, that her parents were probably servants dead from illness or hunger. "This is a mistake," she whispered. "It has to be." "I hope so too." Henry leaned over the desk, his eyes gleaming with cold malice. "Because if not, then we have a much bigger problem than you imagine. There are people in this kingdom who would kill to ensure certain lineages are never discovered. People who made bloody deals to keep power where it is." A shiver ran down Marina's spine. The way he spoke suggested he knew much more than he was revealing, and that this knowledge was dangerous for them both. There were layers of conspiracy and secrets she couldn't even begin to comprehend. "What will happen to me?" "That depends on the Alpha King." Henry returned to examining his documents as if she were no longer there. "He arrives tomorrow at dusk. Until then you stay in the dungeon. And for your own safety, I suggest you pray he finds a different explanation for what happened." The guards escorted her back to the cell, but this time Marina noticed that their attitudes had subtly changed. They no longer treated her as a simple criminal, but with a caution that bordered on respect. It was as if Lord Henry's words had reached their ears, raising doubts about who she truly was. Back in the cold darkness of the dungeon, Marina sat on the stone floor and tried to process everything she had discovered. Stone of recognition, royal lineage, noble blood. The words echoed in her mind like distant bells, each one more impossible than the last. She vaguely remembered her first years in the castle, how she had been brought in very young, with no explanation of her origin. She had always assumed her parents had died of illness or hunger, common fates for the poor of the kingdom. But what if there was another explanation? A noise in the corridor pulled her from her thoughts. Soft, almost inaudible footsteps approached her cell. Marina pressed herself against the bars, trying to see who was coming. A hooded figure emerged from the shadows, moving with feline grace. It was a woman. Marina could tell by the silhouette, but her face remained hidden beneath the dark fabric. There was something familiar in those movements, an elegance that contrasted with the sordid environment of the dungeon. "Marina," the stranger whispered, her voice melodious like a night song. "The moment has finally arrived." "Who are you?" Marina asked, recoiling instinctively. "Someone who has waited a long time to see you awaken." The woman extended a key through the bars. Someone who knew this day would come, even when everyone else doubted. "I can't leave here. If they find me." "They won't find you." The mysterious visitor opened the lock with a fluid movement. "At least not until it's too late to prevent what has already begun." Marina hesitated at the entrance of the open cell. Fleeing could mean confirming all suspicions about her, transforming her from a suspect into a culprit. But staying there, awaiting the Alpha King's judgment, also didn't guarantee her safety. "Who are you?" she repeated. The woman lowered her hood, revealing a face of austere beauty, with violet eyes that seemed to hold ancient secrets. There was something familiar in those features, a subtle resemblance Marina couldn't quite identify. Her hair was golden like Marina's, but with silver strands that spoke of years of experience and wisdom. "My name is Celeste," she said, "and I am your aunt." Marina's world tilted precariously. Family. She had family. She wasn't alone in the world as she had always believed. But before she could fully process this revelation, Celeste continued. "We don't have time for explanations now. The Alpha King is approaching faster than we expected. And there are people in this castle who would rather see you dead than discover the truth about your birth. We need to get out of here." "What truth?" Marina asked, but Celeste was already walking down the corridor. "The truth about why your parents died, the truth about why you were hidden here disguised as an orphan, and the truth about what you truly are." Marina followed her through the dark corridors, her heart pounding erratically in her chest. Each step took her further from the life she knew and closer to a destiny she couldn't imagine. But for the first time since she touched the stone, she felt she wasn't walking blindly. There were answers somewhere ahead, of her. And Celeste, this mysterious aunt who had emerged from the shadows like an angel or a demon, seemed to be the key to finding them. As they crept through the castle's secret passages, Marina heard in the distance the sound of horses galloping on the road. The Alpha King was arriving and she was fleeing. When he found out, his fury would be terrible. But perhaps, she thought as she followed Celeste through the darkness, some truths were worth facing any fury. The forest swallowed their voices like a creature hungry for secrets. Marina followed Celeste along almost, invisible trails occasionally tripping over roots that stretched across the ground like twisted fingers. The waning moon offered little light, but her aunt seemed to know every tree, every stone, every turn in the path. "Where are we going?" Marina asked for the third time, her breath short from the effort. "To a safe place," Celeste replied without slowing her pace, "where I can tell you everything without fear of curious ears." They walked for another hour until they reached a small clearing, surrounded by ancient oak trees whose branches intertwined like a protective roof. In the centre, there was a stone and wood cabin that seemed to have sprung from the very soil, so naturally did it fit into the environment. "Come in," Celeste said, pushing open a wooden door that groaned on its rusty hinges. The cabin's interior was simple but cosy. A fireplace crackled softly in the corner, illuminating shelves filled with books, glass vials, and objects Marina couldn't identify. The air smelled of dried herbs and wood smoke, a scent that inexplicably calmed her. "Sit," Celeste ordered, pointing to a chair near the fireplace, "and prepare to hear things that will change everything you believe about yourself." Marina obeyed, her hands trembling not only from the cold. Celeste prepared 2 cups of tea, the liquid exuding a sweet and comforting aroma, before sitting in the opposite chair. "20 years ago," she began, "your mother was the most beautiful and powerful princess in the kingdom, the only daughter of the predecessor king, the legitimate heir to the throne." "My mother was a princess," Marina almost dropped the cup. "Isabella of Blackwood. Golden hair like yours, green eyes like yours, and a power over ancient magic not seen for generations." Celeste smiled sadly. She was magnificent, and precisely because of that too dangerous for some. Marina tried to imagine her mother as the royalty described, but it was difficult to reconcile that image with the orphan life she had always known. "Then why was I raised as a maid? Why did no one know who I was?" "Because your mother committed the unforgivable crime of falling in love with the wrong man." Celeste took a sip of tea, her eyes lost in memories. Roderick was a common warrior, brave and loyal, but without title or fortune. When the king discovered their romance, he forbade any contact between them. And they obeyed. Isabella would never obey orders regarding her heart. Celeste's smile grew more bitter. She fled with Roderick in the dead of night, abandoning her right to the throne to live as common folk. They secretly married and lived a few happy years in a distant village. Marina felt something clench in her chest. For the first time, she had a story about her parents, faces to put on the ghosts that had always populated her imagination. What happened to them? Isabella's uncle, Lord Malcolm Thorne, never accepted losing the chance to govern the kingdom. With the princess out of the way, he became the presumptive heir. But then you were born. Celeste fixed her eyes on Marina. A daughter of the true royal lineage with a legitimate right to the throne. So he sent assassins after you. Celeste's voice became hard as stone. They found Isabella and Roderick when you were only 3 years old. Your parents died protecting you, but they managed to hide you before they were killed. Tears began to stream down Marina's face. The truth was crueler than any fantasy she had created about her origin. Her parents hadn't died of illness or accident. They had been murdered because of her. How did I end up in the castle? I found you first, Celeste explained. "I had been searching for you for weeks, trying to warn them of the danger. When I arrived at the village, it was too late. But you were alive, hidden in a barn, crying alone in the darkness. Why didn't you raise me?" "Because Malcolm would have found me," Celeste sighed heavily. "He knew my face, knew I was Isabella's sister. If I appeared raising an orphan girl, he would discover the truth, so I placed you in the castle, disguised as the daughter of dead servants, where you could grow up invisible until the right moment arrived." Marina tried to absorb all that information. Her entire life had been a lie constructed to protect her. Every humiliation, every moment of loneliness, every feeling of not belonging anywhere, all of it had been necessary to keep her alive. The right moment for what? To awaken your true power. Celeste leaned forward, her eyes shining in the firelight. The stone of recognition doesn't activate for just anyone with noble blood. It responds only to those destined to govern, those who carry the mark of true royalty. Your touch proved you are the legitimate heir. "But I don't want to be queen," Marina protested. "I don't even know how to be." "It's not about what you want, child." Celeste's voice became gentle but firm. "It's about what the kingdom needs. Malcolm has governed with an iron fist, oppressing the people, enriching only the nobles who support him. People suffer while he banquets. You are the only one who can change that." A distant boom echoed through the forest, followed by the sound of galloping horses. Marina and Celeste exchanged glances, immediate tension filling the air. "They found us," Celeste whispered, standing up quickly. "Who?" "Malcolm's men. Or," she hesitated, looking out the window, "the Alpha King." The sound of the horses was growing closer, now accompanied by male voices shouting orders. Marina felt panic rise in her throat like acid. "What do we do?" "You run," Celeste said, rushing to a shelf and grabbing a leather bag. "There's a secret passage behind the fireplace. It leads to a hidden valley where you can hide until I come for you." "And you?" "I'll distract them for as long as I can." Celeste pushed the bag into Marina's hands. Inside are food, water, and some things that belong to your mother, including a letter she wrote to you before she died. Marina's heart raced. A letter from her mother. Words written specifically for her, spanning time like a bridge between past and present. "Celeste, there's no time for sentimentality." Her aunt pushed a disguised lever, and part of the wall behind the fireplace moved, revealing a dark tunnel. "Go. Now." Marina hesitated at the tunnel entrance. Fleeing meant confirming all suspicions about her, transforming her from a suspect into a culprit. But staying there, waiting for the Alpha King's judgment, also didn't guarantee her safety. "Be careful," she whispered, hugging her aunt quickly before slipping into the tunnel. "Remember who you are," Celeste replied. "No matter what happens, you are Isabella of Blackwood, daughter of a king, legitimate heir. No one can take that truth from you." The wall closed behind Marina, leaving her in the absolute darkness of the tunnel. She fumbled along the stone walls, following the narrow path that sloped gently downwards. Behind her, she heard increasingly loud voices, heavy footsteps invading the cabin. The tunnel seemed endless, but finally she saw a faint light ahead. She emerged into a small natural grotto, illuminated by moonlight entering through an opening in the ceiling. The air was fresh and smelled of moss and running water. Marina sat on a smooth stone and opened the bag Celeste had given her. Inside she found bread, dried fruit, a canteen of water, and at the bottom, wrapped in blue silk, a golden wax-sealed envelope. With trembling hands she broke the seal and unfolded the parchment. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, and each word seemed to carry the love of a desperate mother. "My dearest daughter, if you are reading this letter, it means the worst fears have come true. Your father and I will no longer be here to protect you, but our love will remain with you forever. You are more precious than any crown, more valuable than any kingdom. You were born from the union of two souls who chose love above all conventions, and that love runs in your veins like a force no one can destroy. One day they will discover who you are. When that moment comes, do not allow fear to paralyze you. You have the power to change the world, to bring justice where there is oppression, to govern with your heart instead of a sword. Trust your Aunt Celeste. Trust your own heart. And always remember, you are loved, you are strong, you are the hope this kingdom needs. With all the love a mother can give, Isabella of Blackwood. Marina pressed the letter against her chest, feeling as if she had finally found the missing piece of her soul. She wasn't an orphan. She wasn't insignificant. She was a daughter of true love, heir to a legacy of courage and sacrifice. Outside, in the forest, the sound of the search intensified. Voices shouted orders, horses whinnied, branches broke under hurried footsteps. Soon they would find the grotto. But now Marina knew who she was. And as terrifying as the future that awaited her might be, she would face it with the dignity of one who finally knew her own story. Hiding the letter in her chest, she stood up and began to plan her next move. The Alpha King was somewhere out there, looking for her. And when they finally met, it would be as the true heir to the kingdom, not as the frightened orphan she had been until that morning. The hunt had begun, but she would no longer be the prey. Dawn arrived tinged with red, as if the sky itself anticipated the bloodshed to come. Marina had spent the night huddled in the grotto, alternating between moments of restless sleep and tense vigilance, always alert to the sounds of the forest that might indicate the approach of her pursuers. When the first rays of sun pierced the G Grotto's opening, she finally allowed herself to leave her hiding place. The forest was too silent, as if all the animals had fled from human presence. It was not a good sign. Following her own footprints back, Marina found Celeste's cabin reduced to still smoking ashes. Her heart tightened at the sight of the wreckage, broken furniture, burned books, shattered vials scattered across the floor. But there was no blood, no body. She managed to escape, she murmured to herself, clinging to that hope. It was then that she heard horses approaching again, this time from a different direction. She quickly hid behind a large tree, watching through the low branches as the riders emerged from the woods. There were 5 men, all wearing dark armor that gleamed like dried blood in the sun. But it was the knight leading the group who made the air disappear from her lungs. He was immense, taller than any man she had ever seen, with broad shoulders that seemed capable of carrying the weight of the world. Black hair cascaded over his shoulders like a dark silk waterfall, framing a face that could have been sculpted by the gods, beautiful in an almost cruel way, with a beauty that intimidated more than it attracted. But it was his eyes that paralyzed her, golden like molten metal, too intense to belong to a mere mortal. The Alpha King had arrived. He dismounted his black horse with fluid movements, like a predator accustomed to hunting. When his feet touched the ground, Marina felt a strange vibration course through her body, as if something within her recognized something within him. It was impossible, but it was real. The cabin was burned recently, one of the soldiers said, sifting through the ashes with the tip of his spear. It can't be more than a few hours old. They haven't gone far. The Alpha King's voice was deep, resonant, laden with an authority that echoed in the bones of those who heard it. Spread out. Examine every stone, every tree, every shadow. She's here. Marina felt her heart pound. How could he be so sure? How did he know she was still in the area? The Alpha King approached the tree where she was hiding, and Marina pressed herself against the trunk, trying to become part of the wood. But then he stopped just a few feet away, tilting his head as if listening to something no one else could perceive. Interesting, he murmured, his golden eyes, scanning the forest with unsettling precision. "What is it, Your Majesty?" asked one of the soldiers. "She is stronger than we expected." A dangerous smile curved the Alpha King's lips. "I can feel her presence, but I can't pinpoint her exact location. She is hiding from me. That is unprecedented." Marina swallowed hard. He really could sense where she was, like an animal tracking prey by scent. But apparently her terror had awakened some kind of natural defense that kept her partially hidden. "Keep searching," the king ordered, "but carefully. I don't want her harmed." The way he said it sent a shiver down Marina's spine. There was no cruelty in his voice, only a cold determination that was even more frightening. He didn't want to hurt her, at least not physically. But that didn't mean his intentions were good. The soldiers fanned out through the forest, methodically searching every possible hiding place. Marina knew it was only a matter of time until they found her, but she couldn't move without revealing her position. She was trapped. It was then that she heard another sound, soft footsteps approaching from behind. She turned slowly and almost cried out when she saw Celeste emerging from the trees, seemingly unharmed but with torn clothes and soot on her face. "Come," her aunt whispered, making urgent gestures. "Quickly!" Marina hesitated. What if it was a trap? What if Celeste had been captured and forced to turn her in? But the older woman's eyes showed no signs of coercion, only desperate urgency. Deciding to trust, Marina followed Celeste along an almost imperceptible trail that wound through the trees. They moved in absolute silence, communicating only by gestures, always attentive to the sounds of the soldiers scouring the forest. After several minutes of tense walking, they reached a deep ravine hidden by dense vegetation. Celeste pointed downwards, where there was a series of natural caves. "There," she whispered. "We can hide until they leave." They carefully descended the steep slope, using exposed roots for support. The caves were more extensive than they seemed, connecting in an underground network that stretched for miles. "How did you escape?" Marina asked when they finally felt safe enough to talk. "I saw them coming before they found the cabin," Celeste explained. "I had an escape passage prepared years ago. I burned everything so they wouldn't find evidence about you. And now? Now you need to make a decision." Celeste sat on a smooth stone, her face serious. "You can keep running, trying to hide for the rest of your life. Or you can face the Alpha King and find out what he really wants. He wants to hand me over to Lord Malcolm." "Are you sure about that?" Celeste tilted her head. "Think, Marina. If the Alpha King were working for Malcolm, he wouldn't need to come personally. He could have sent soldiers to capture you, and that's that. Why would he come all the way here himself, Marina?" "Hadn't thought of that." It was true that the Alpha King's personal presence seemed excessive if the goal was just to capture a fugitive. "What are you suggesting?" "That perhaps he has his own reasons for looking for you. Reasons that could be beneficial to you." "Like what?" "The Alpha King is not Malcolm's subject," Celeste explained. "He governs independent territories, has his own army, his own laws. If he recognized your legitimacy as heir..." "He could help me reclaim the throne," Marina finished, finally understanding. "Exactly. But that would only happen if he believed in your cause. If he saw in you a leader worthy of support." A noise above them interrupted the conversation. Heavy footsteps walked along the edge of the ravine, accompanied by male voices. The soldiers had found their hiding place. "Your Majesty," one of them shouted, "there are footprints leading down here." The Alpha King's voice echoed through the ravine like distant thunder. "Surround the area. Let no one escape." Celeste grabbed Marina's arm. "The time has come to decide. You can try to escape through the caves and live the rest of your life as a fugitive. Or you can go up there and face your destiny. What if he kills me? Then you will die as a princess, not as a criminal." Celeste's eyes shone with fierce pride. "But I know men like him. He doesn't kill without reason. And you, my dear, are far from useless to him." Steps began to descend the slope. There was no more time for hesitation. Marina looked at her aunt. then at the dark depths of the caves that could offer her a few more days of freedom. But then she thought of her mother's letter, the words about courage and heart. She thought of all the years lived as a shadow, invisible and despised. And she thought of the power that had awakened when she touched the stone, the energy that still surged in her veins like an unfulfilled promise. "If I die, tell my story to someone," she said to Celeste, "so they know that Isabella of Blackwood had a daughter, and that she didn't die on her knees." "You won't die," Celeste replied with conviction. "You will live to become the queen this kingdom deserves." Marina took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and began to walk towards the cave entrance. Each step brought her closer to the confrontation that would define her future, closer to the man whose golden eyes seemed capable of seeing through her soul. When she emerged from the cave, she found 5 spears pointed at her and the Alpha King waiting at the top of the ravine, immobile like a marble statue. For a moment, they stared at each other across the distance, 2 predators assessing each other. Then Marina began to climb, not as a captured fugitive, but as a princess who had finally decided to claim her place in the world. And when she reached the top, when she stood face to face with the most powerful man in the kingdom, she lifted her chin and met his golden eyes without flinching. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. "I believe you are looking for me." The smile that curved the Alpha King's lips was both dangerous and admiring. "Finally," he murmured. "The true Isabella of Blackwood decides to appear." The silence that followed was as dense as morning fog, laden with tension and unspoken possibilities. Marina kept her gaze fixed on the Alpha King's golden eyes, refusing to show the storm of emotions raging within her. He studied her with an intensity that made her skin tingle, as if he could decipher all her secrets just by observing. "Isabella of Blackwood," he repeated, his grave voice echoing through the valley. "Or do you prefer Marina, the name you used to hide for 20 years?" "My true name," she said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice, "is Marina Isabella of Blackwood, daughter of Isabella and Roderick, granddaughter of the predecessor king, legitimate heir to the stone throne." A murmur passed among the soldiers, but the Alpha King raised his hand, demanding silence. His eyes never left Marina's face, as if he were looking for signs of lies or weakness. "Interesting," he murmured, taking a step closer. "The ragged orphan who touched my stone now claims royal blood. How can I be sure you are not just a clever maid trying to save her own skin?" "Because," Marina said, extending her hand towards him, "your stone recognized what was in me before I even knew myself. It doesn't lie, does it?" The bold gesture made all the soldiers tense, their hands instinctively going to their sword hilts. But the Alpha King merely smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes but carried a dangerous approval. "Courage," he observed, "or monumental stupidity. I haven't decided which yet." "Perhaps they are the same thing, in the right situation," Marina retorted. This drew a genuine laugh from the Alpha King, a deep sound that rumbled in his chest, like a contented animal. "Oh, I'm going to like you," he said, "much more than I expected." He approached until they were only an arm's length apart. Up close, Marina could see small scars on his face, marks of ancient battles that only intensified his brutal beauty. The scent emanating from him was intoxicating. Leather, metal, and something wild that made her body react in ways she didn't understand. "Give me your hand," he ordered. Marina hesitated only a second before extending her right hand. When his fingers touched her skin, an electric current coursed through her arm, making her gasp in surprise. The king's golden eyes widened slightly, as if he too had felt something unexpected. He turned her hand, examining her palm closely. "Marks of hard labor," he observed. "Kitchen, cleaning, manual service. Your hands tell the story of a life of servitude." "Yes," Marina confirmed, trying to ignore the heat spreading through her arm where he touched her. I was raised as a maid, treated as such, but that doesn't change who I am. No, he agreed, releasing her hand abruptly. But it explains why it took so long for you to awaken. Royal power that is repressed from childhood takes longer to emerge. He stepped back a few paces, his hands clasped behind his back. All right, he said, his voice taking on a tone of absolute authority. We will test this claim of yours. How? By returning to the castle, touching the stone, again this time in my presence. His eyes glinted with something that could be amusement or threat. If you truly are who you say you are, the stone will react. If you are lying, then what? Then you will be judged for impersonating royalty, high treason, and escaping prison. The penalties for these crimes are severe. Marina felt a chill run down her spine but kept her expression firm. And if I prove I am legitimate, then, he said, circling her like a predator assessing its prey, we will have to discuss what to do with a royal heir who appeared after 20 years to complicate the established order. Complicate for whom? The Alpha King stopped before her again, so close Marina could see the golden flecks in his irises. For me, he said simply. For Lord Malcolm. For all those who made deals based on the assumption that the royal line of succession had been extinguished. What kind of deals? A cruel smile curved his lips. The kind that involves territories, resources, military power, and strategic marriages. The kind men kill to protect. Marina swallowed hard. She was beginning to understand that her mere existence posed a threat to many more people than she had imagined. Then why not kill me now and solve all these problems? Because, he said, leaning closer, his voice becoming a dangerous whisper, you might be more useful alive than dead, depending on how clever you are. Useful how? That depends entirely on you. He stepped back again, signalling to his soldiers. Bring the horses. We're returning to the castle. The ride back to the castle was tense and silent. Marina rode between two soldiers, with the Alpha King leading the group and Celeste closing the entourage under surveillance. The sun was high now, burning her back through the thin fabric of her dress. As they approached the castle, Marina could see activity on the ramparts. Soldiers rushed back and forth, banners fluttered in the wind, and even from a distance, the tension in the air was palpable. When they reached the main gate, a reception committee awaited them. Lord Henry Blackwood was there, visibly nervous, alongside several other nobles Marina vaguely recognised. But it was the figure in the centre of the group that made her blood run cold. Lord Malcolm Thorne was exactly as she had imagined a usurper would be. Tall, elegant, with grey hair combed back and eyes cold as stone. There was something reptilian in his posture, a predatory quality that hid behind diplomatic smiles and studied gestures. Your Majesty, he said, bowing in calculated reverence. What an honour to receive you in our humble territory. Malcolm. The Alpha King dismounted with fluid movements, not returning the courtesy. I have come to resolve an issue that seems to have created confusion in your domains. The Hall of Mirrors had never seemed so imposing as it did at that moment. Marina walked through the familiar corridors with footsteps that echoed like drumbeats, aware that every person in the castle now knew who she claimed to be. Whispers followed her around corners, curious and fearful glances watched her from all directions. When the double doors of the hall opened, she felt a tightening in her stomach. Everything was exactly as she had left it, the mirrors infinitely reflecting the light of the chandeliers, the marble floor polished like a frozen lake. And in the centre, the stone of recognition awaited on its pedestal, still marked by the golden cracks she had caused. Impressive, murmured the Alpha King, approaching the stone with measured steps. I haven't seen such an intense reaction in decades. Marina noticed how all the nobles kept a respectful distance from the stone, as if it were a dangerous animal that could attack at any moment. Only the Alpha King moved naturally, circling the pedestal like an owner appraising a valuable asset. "Touch the stone, Marina," he said. "Now." Marina took a deep breath and extended her hand towards the cracked surface. The moment her fingers brushed the stone, the world exploded in light. But this time it was different. The light wasn't just golden. There was silver, blue, colours that had no name dancing around her hands. The stone didn't just crack. It transformed, layers breaking away to reveal something that had been hidden within. Marina felt power course through her veins like liquid fire, but now she knew what it was. It wasn't wild magic or uncontrolled force. It was royal authority, the blood of kings reconnecting with its destiny, an ancestral lineage awakening after decades of dormancy. When the transformation ended, where once there had been a rough stone, now there was a perfect crystal with multiple facets, each reflecting a different colour. And in the centre, engraved in ancient runes that seemed to have been sculpted by pure light, was a symbol: the crown of Blackwood. The silence in the hall was absolute. Even the Alpha King seemed impressed by the magnitude of the transformation. "Impossible," Malcolm whispered, recoiling as if the light could burn him. "Very possible," said a new voice from the hall entrance. Everyone turned to see an elderly woman entering with regal dignity, leaning on an ornate cane. Marina recognized her immediately. It was Lady Hope, the kingdom's oldest counsellor who had disappeared years ago. "You have your mother's eyes," she said softly to Marina, "and her stubbornness too, from what I've seen." She turned to the crowd. "I was present when Isabella of Blackwood was born. I was present when she fled with Roderick. And I was present when she was murdered by order of Malcolm Thorne." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Malcolm took a step forward, his face contorted with rage. "You can't prove that." "I can," Lady Hope said calmly, "because I helped hide the child before the assassins arrived." Malcolm, desperate, drew a dagger and lunged towards Marina. "If I cannot have the kingdom, no one can." The Alpha King stepped between them, disarming Malcolm with brutal ease. "Someone should have taught you that attacking a woman under my protection is a bad idea." "Protection?" Marina looked at him in surprise. "Ah, yes." The Alpha King turned to her, his golden eyes gleaming. "Marina Isabella of Blackwood, by the grace of the royal blood that runs in your veins, I recognize you as the legitimate queen of Stonehaven Kingdom." A stunned silence filled the hall. Then, slowly, one person knelt. Then another, and another. In a matter of minutes, everyone in the hall was on their knees, paying homage to the new queen. Everyone except the Alpha King, who remained standing, watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. "And now, Your Majesty," he said, "we need to discuss the terms of our partnership." In the private audience chamber, Marina sat in a chair that had belonged to kings before her, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. The carved wood of the chair told stories of generations of rulers who had made decisions that changed the destiny of thousands of people. Across the massive oak table that had witnessed negotiations of war and peace, the Alpha King watched her with an intensity that made her skin tingle, as if 1,000 tiny flames danced upon it. The atmosphere was charged with a tension that went far beyond politics. There was something primal in the air between them, a magnetic attraction neither could deny, but which also represented dangers Marina was only beginning to comprehend. She could feel the power emanating from him like physical heat, could see the way he controlled himself not to get too close, could sense that he was fighting instincts that went far beyond diplomatic courtesy. "What do you want from me?" she asked, trying to keep her voice firm even as her heart pounded. "Regional stability," he replied, but there was something more in his golden eyes that contradicted the simplicity of the answer. "Your kingdom is strategically important. It controls 3 major trade routes and borders territories I prefer to keep as allies rather than enemies. But there are also other considerations. What considerations? You awakened something that had been dormant for decades. The stone of recognition hasn't reacted to anyone since the death of the last true king. That means you carry a power that can be used to stabilize the entire region, or to destroy it completely. Marina felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying I'm dangerous? I'm saying you are powerful, and power without proper direction is always dangerous. He leaned forward, his intense eyes fixed on hers. What I want is an intelligent queen who understands that our interests can be mutually beneficial. Someone who can rule with wisdom instead of impulse. There was something in the way he said it that made Marina's heart race dangerously. It wasn't just politics. There was a personal tension in the air between them, an electric current that grew stronger with each passing second they spent in each other's presence. What exactly are you suggesting? She asked, though she already suspected the answer. Marriage, he said simply, as if discussing the weather. The word hung in the air between them like an impending storm. Marina felt the blood drain from her face, leaving her dizzy. Marriage? A political union between our kingdoms. You maintain your autonomy as queen, I guarantee military protection and economic support. Our combined armies would be able to maintain peace throughout the region. It would be advantageous for both of us. And what about the personal part of this union? She asked, trying to keep her voice neutral even as her heart beat like a war drum in her chest. The smile that curved his lips was both dangerous and provocative. The personal part would be entirely determined by us. No external pressure, no obligations beyond those we choose to accept. But I won't lie to you, Marina. There's an attraction between us that goes far beyond politics. Marina stood abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked the garden where she had spent so many hours working as an invisible maid. She needed space to think, to breathe, to process the magnitude of what he was proposing. The familiar view of the garden calmed her slightly. At least some things remained constant in a world that had turned upside down in a matter of days. You barely know me, she said without turning, observing the roses she herself had planted years ago. How can you want to marry me? I know enough. She heard his chair creak as he stood, felt his presence approaching even without looking. You are brave enough to face armed soldiers when you could have fled. Intelligent enough to survive 20 years disguised in a hostile environment. Powerful enough to activate a stone that has been dormant for decades. And strong enough to maintain your dignity even when the whole world tried to break you. Footsteps approached behind her, and Marina felt the warmth of his body even before he spoke again. And there's something else. What thing? The way our powers reacted to each other. His voice was closer now, almost a whisper that sent shivers down her neck. You felt it too when we touched. The connection. It's as if our bloodlines recognized something in each other. As if we were made to complement each other. Marina closed her eyes, remembering the electric current that coursed through her body when his hands touched hers. It had been impossible to ignore, a sensation that went far beyond mere physical touch. It was as if something within her had awakened the moment he touched her, as if a part of herself that had always been dormant had finally found its match. That doesn't mean we should marry, she protested, but her voice came out weaker than she intended. No, he agreed, and she could feel he was even closer now. But it means we could be compatible in more ways than just politics. It means there's a real possibility that this union is more than just convenience, that it's a true partnership in every sense. She turned to face him and found he was much closer than she expected. So close she could see the golden flecks in his irises that seemed to dance like living flames, tiny scars on his skin that told stories of battles and conflicts she could only imagine. The way his lips curved slightly when he watched her with an intensity that made her stomach clench uncomfortably and thrillingly at the same time. What if I say no? She asked, her voice little more than a whisper. "Then I will respect your decision," he said, and there was absolute sincerity in his voice. "But I will still offer alliance and protection. Your kingdom needs support, and I will not abandon you to the political wolves who will surely try to destroy you now that your identity has been revealed. Just without the personal benefits that a more intimate union could provide." Personal benefits? His smile became frankly predatory, but there was also an unexpected tenderness in his eyes that made Marina's heart race even faster. "Marina, you spent 20 years invisible, ignored, treated as if you were worthless. Don't you want to discover what it's like to be truly seen, truly desired, truly valued by someone who has the power to protect and honor you as you deserve?" The air between them became charged with electricity so intense that Marina could almost see it crackling like golden lightning. She could feel the warmth emanating from his body, could see the intensity in his eyes that promised things she didn't even know existed. There was something primitive and powerful in the way he looked at her, as if she were the only person in the world who mattered, as if every second away from her was torture. "This is manipulation," she accused, but her voice came out much weaker than she intended, betraying the effect his words were having on her. "This is honesty," he retorted, and this time there was a vulnerability in his voice she didn't expect to hear. "I want you, Marina, not just as a political ally, but as a woman, as queen, as an equal, as a partner in every sense of the word." He extended his hand towards her, and she could see that he was also trembling slightly. "The question is, do you want me to?" Marina looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face. There was sincerity there, beneath the mask of power and control. He was offering himself completely, not just as a king, but as a man. He was becoming vulnerable in a way he had probably never done before, and she could see that this was as frightening for him as it was for her. "I don't even know your real name," she whispered, buying time to process everything that was happening. "Dominic," he said, and for the first time his voice carried a softness that contrasted with the authority he normally projected. "Dominic of Moonshadow, king of the Northern Bluffs, protector of the Cragstone Peaks, and, if you accept, your future husband. Dominic," she repeated, testing the name on her lips as if it were a magic word. "Say yes, Marina." His voice had become persuasive, almost hypnotic, but there was also a desperate urgency that revealed how much this answer mattered to him. "Say yes to the power we can share. Say yes to the kingdom we can build together. Say yes to the possibility of true love in a world where most royal marriages are just political transactions. Say yes to me." Marina looked into his golden eyes and saw her future reflected there. Not the future she had dreamed of when she was an invisible orphan, but something bigger, bolder, more terrifying and exciting than any fantasy she had ever dared to create. She saw shared power, united kingdoms, the possibility of making a real difference in the lives of thousands of people. But more than that, she saw the chance to be truly loved, to matter to someone, to have a place in the world where she completely belonged. Before Marina could answer, before she could organize the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions that took over her mind, he bent down and touched his lips to hers. The kiss was soft at first, questioning, giving her a chance to pull back if she wanted. But when she didn't pull away, when her own lips instinctively responded to the invitation, he deepened the contact with a passion that completely surprised her. One of his hands went to her waist, pulling her closer, while the other tangled in her golden hair that had come loose from the rough twine during the tumultuous day. Marina felt the world disappear around her, as if the very foundations of reality had dissolved, leaving only her and him in that moment, suspended in time. There was only his warmth wrapping around her like a protective blanket, the taste of danger and promise on his lips, the way her entire body reacted to his touch as if she had been created specifically to fit against him. The kiss carried years of loneliness from both sides, the hunger for true connection that they both had hidden behind masks of strength and independence. For Marina, it was the first moment in her life when she felt truly desired, truly valued. For Dominic, it was the first time in decades that he lowered his defenses completely, allowing himself to be vulnerable with another person. When they finally separated, both were breathless, trembling slightly with the intensity of what had just happened. Marina could feel her heart beating so hard that she was sure he could hear it, could see the reflection of her own emotions in the golden eyes that stared at her with a mix of passion, tenderness, and something that could be nascent love. "Is that a yes?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. Marina stared at him for a long moment, thinking of everything she had lost over the years, everything she had gained in the last few hours, and everything she could still achieve alongside this extraordinary man. She thought of her mother's letter, the words about love and courage, about the need to fight for what was right even when it was frightening. She thought of the power that now ran in her veins, the responsibility of an entire kingdom that depended on her to find peace and prosperity. And she thought of the man before her, dangerous and powerful, but also willing to share all of it with her, to treat her as an equal, to offer not just a political marriage, but the possibility of true love in a world where it was almost impossible for people in their positions. "Yes," she finally said, and the word came out like a sacred promise. "Yes to the alliance. Yes to the marriage. Yes to you." The smile that lit up Dominic's face was dazzling, completely transforming his features from something intimidating to something truly beautiful. Then it settled. He held her hands with reverence, kissing each one as if they were precious relics. "Marina Isabella of Blackwood, Queen of Stonehaven Kingdom, will be my wife and queen consort of the Northern Bluffs." "When?" she asked, still trying to believe it was really happening. "Immediately," he said, and there was an urgency in his voice that went beyond simple impatience. "The sooner we formalize our union, the sooner we can begin working together to stabilize the region, and the sooner you will be safe from any attempt to question your legitimacy or attacks from enemies who would prefer to see you dead." "Immediately as in, Lady Hope is a qualified religious authority. We have enough witnesses, and I brought rings, just in case." He smiled with the expression of someone who had planned this possibility from the start. "Unless you prefer an elaborate ceremony with hundreds of guests and months of preparation." Marina thought of the simple life she had led, the pompous ceremonies she had only seen from afar, watching as an invisible maid while nobles celebrated moments that seemed to belong to a world completely different from hers. "Simple is good," she said, feeling a strange peace settle in her chest. "As long as it's real." "It will be the realest thing I've ever done," he promised, and there was an intensity in his voice that left no doubt about his sincerity. An hour later, in the same Hall of Mirrors where the entire transformation had begun, Marina Isabella of Blackwood prepared to become Marina of Moonshadow, Queen of 2 kingdoms, wife of the most powerful man in the northern lands. The hall had been quickly prepared for the ceremony, with flowers gathered from the garden she herself had tended arranged around the stone of recognition, which now served as an improvised but deeply symbolic altar. Celeste had managed to find a suitable dress, not the gold-embroidered silk a princess would normally wear, but a simple white linen dress that had belonged to her mother, carefully preserved over the years. When Marina put it on, she felt as if she were being embraced by Isabella of Blackwood's love, as if her mother were there with her in that crucial moment. The ceremony was small but solemn, laden with emotions that transcended any pomp or circumstance. Lady Hope, wearing her royal councillor robes for the first time in years, officiated the vows with a dignity that lent sacred gravity to the moment. Celeste wept with joy, finally seeing the niece she had protected for so long find not only her place in the world, but also the possibility of true happiness. The few nobles who had remained loyal to the memory of the original royal family witnessed the event with reverence, understanding that they were witnessing not just a marriage, but the rebirth of a lineage many thought had been extinguished forever. And the mirrors, infinitely multiplying the image of the new royal couple, created the sensation that the entire kingdom was there to witness that union. When the time came for the vows, Marina and Dominic looked into each other's eyes, and the words they exchanged were more than political promises. They were oaths of the heart, commitments of two souls who had found in each other not just strategic partnership, but the possibility of true love. "I, Dominic of Moonshadow," he said, his voice echoing through the hall with an authority that made the very crystals of the chandeliers vibrate, "take you, Marina Isabella of Blackwood, as my wife, my queen, my equal in all things. I promise to protect you, honor you, and rule by your side with wisdom and justice." "I, Marina Isabella of Blackwood," she replied, surprised by the firmness of her own voice. "Take you, Dominic of Moonshadow, as my husband, my king consort, my partner in all the battles to come. I promise to support you, challenge you when necessary, and build with you a kingdom where justice and love can coexist." The rings Dominic had brought were simple gold bands engraved with ancient runes that symbolized union, protection, and shared power. When he slid the ring onto Marina's finger, she felt a familiar energy course through her hand, the same energy she had felt when touching the stone of recognition, as if the ring carried a fragment of that ancestral power. When Dominic kissed his new wife to seal the union, it was different from the previous kiss. This one carried not only passion and promise, but also sacred commitment, the foundation of a partnership that would go far beyond the personal to affect the destiny of entire kingdoms. The mirrors captured and reflected that moment infinitely, creating the illusion that the entire universe was celebrating that union. Lady Hope declared them husband and wife before the gods and men, and when the words echoed through the hall, the stone of recognition itself pulsed with golden light, as if blessing that union with its ancestral approval. The celebrations that followed were modest but sincere. The entire castle was filled with an energy of renewal and hope not seen for decades. Servants who had served the original royal family wept with joy at seeing the lineage restored. Soldiers who had guarded secrets about their loyalty to Isabella of Blackwood's memory could finally reveal their true feelings. And the common people, learning that their true queen had returned, began to sing songs of celebration that echoed through the streets late into the night. But for Marina and Dominic, the most precious moments were those spent in silence, just the two of them, observing the stone of recognition that had changed their lives forever. The stone now shone with a constant and serene light, as if it were finally at peace after decades of waiting. The sun set through the high windows of the hall, tinging everything with gold like a divine blessing that transformed every surface into liquid gold. Stonehaven Kingdom had its legitimate queen back, the Northern Bluffs had a new queen consort, and Marina Isabella of Blackwood finally had a place in the world where she could be completely herself. The orphan had become queen. The fugitive had become leader. The invisible had become the most powerful woman in two kingdoms. And it all began with a simple touch, on a stone that recognized what she had always been, even when the whole world insisted on seeing her as nothing. On the night that followed, while celebrations continued to echo through the castle, and subjects celebrated the return of legitimate royalty, Marina and Dominic remained in the hall that had witnessed their transformation, observing the stone of recognition that had united them. The candles reflected in the mirrors like infinite stars, creating a magical atmosphere that seemed to suspend time around them. "Any regrets?" he asked, wrapping an arm around her waist and pulling her closer. "None," she replied, leaning against his chest and finally feeling the security of belonging to someone who valued her completely. "And you?" Only that I didn't find you sooner, he said, kissing the top of her head with a tenderness that contrasted with his reputation as a ruthless warrior. Marina smiled, feeling complete for the first time in her life. Outside, the world kept turning, full of political challenges they would have to face together, of enemies who would try to separate their kingdoms, of responsibilities that would test both their union and their leadership ability. But there, in that perfect moment, she had everything she had always sought without knowing what it was: family, purpose, power used for good, and true love that transcended political convenience. The story of the orphan who became queen had come to an end, closing a chapter of pain and invisibility. The story of the woman who had changed two kingdoms was just beginning, opening infinite possibilities for a future built on love, justice, and shared power. And as the stone of recognition continued to shine softly in the candlelight, seeming to smile with ancestral satisfaction, Marina knew that her true journey was just beginning. The end.